We're going to start with our motivation. We'll be using the root text of 37 practices. So if you want to turn to page 2. So I'll just do a couple of the verses and then we'll just sit and contemplate. Starting with verse 5. When you keep their company, your 3 poisons increase. Your activities of hearing, thinking, and meditation decline, and they make you lose your love and compassion. Give up bad friends. This is the practice of bodhisattvas. When you rely on them, your faults come to an end, and your good qualities grow like the waxing moon. Cherish spiritual teachers even more than your own body. This is the practice of bodhisattvas. Bound himself in the jail of cyclic existence, what worldly god can give you protection? Therefore, when you seek refuge, take refuge in the 3 jewels which will not betray you. This is the practice of bodhisattvas. Okay, welcome everybody. So when we look at these verses, verse 5, 6, and 7, this is talking very strongly about conditions for becoming a bodhisattva. And so the main premise here is that conditions have an influence. And when we talk about Dharma, we're not pretending that there aren't conditions. We're just remembering that there's always a substantial cause, which is a deeper, more profound part of the experience. So here it's saying, surround yourself with people who bring out the best in you. Avoid people that bring out the worst in you. It's really common sense, basic wisdom that you already know. But in a way, it's like giving yourself permission to set boundaries with people that actually undermine the work that you're trying to do. And so this is an interesting premise because when we talk about becoming a bodhisattva, we don't want to exclude anyone. We don't want to shut anyone out. We're not going to ever give up on anyone. But this is acknowledging that while we're practicing, this is the practice of a bodhisattva. This is not what bodhisattvas do once they're fully fledged bodhisattvas. This is what the practice is. And I think it's important for us to sit with the fact that there actually are people and influences in our life that make things worse, right? That make our minds worse. There are certain, what we call bad friends. It doesn't necessarily have to be people, right? It could be certain behaviors are our bad friends. Certain books are nourishing and enriching or relaxing. Other books agitate the mind, make you more divisive, etc. You could take something really simple like reading the news. Is reading the news a good friend or a bad friend? And it really depends on the individual. Is this something that is making you look at the suffering and the hardship in the world and you think, I must free sentient beings from this suffering? I must be a cause for harmony and unity and clarity and all of these good things? Or do we just read the news and it's then something that we can bitch about the rest of the day? And it's just, fuel for gossip, it's fuel for divisiveness, it's a way to feel connected to other people, but through anger, right? So, you can just take something that on its own, it's just neutral, right? Reading the news is not inherently positive, it's not inherently negative, it's just reading the news. But is it a good friend or a bad friend to you? So this is the conversation that we want to have with ourselves, with especially our repetitive activities. The things that we do a lot, the things that we've done for so long we don't second guess them anymore. Certain types of meals, certain types of things that you drink, certain types of, yes, people specifically, but we're really looking at the whole spectrum of behaviors. So when you rely on them, your faults come to an end and good qualities grow like the waxing moon. Cherish spiritual teachers. This is just the opposite of what was said in the previous verse. So surround yourself with influences that are positive without giving all the credit to the influence, right? So this is a little bit what we were talking about last week with worldly wisdom, right? So if you want to look at this, this sheet that says, where does happiness come from? Yeah, everybody pull it up in a way that's accessible for you, whether it's your phone or your tablet, or if you printed it out. Or if your computer has really high resolution, you can zoom there. Okay, so what we were talking about is that these conditions for happiness, this is what we already know in our life. But the reason that I've kind of isolated them and categorized them and broken them into pieces is that sometimes we forget the amount of worldly wisdom we already know, and we seek, quote, lower forms of happiness when our capacity is for higher forms of happiness. So the whole premise of this section of teachings that we're going to do for the next few weeks is that happiness is achievable even in samsara. There are cleaner and more stable forms that are going to be healthy for us, and there are really specific ways to encourage those. So all of this is like, let's get happier, let's have more energy, let's have more momentum, let's engage with our life with a lot more richness and touch the beauty that is there. But how do we actually do that? So when we're looking at this particular thing, this is just reviving what we already know, right? You could look at Maslow's hierarchy if you prefer. You know, you could look at some other system of categorization that you're used to. But basically what we're looking at here is that there is sensorial happiness, there's happiness that's relational, there's happiness that's creative, and there's happiness that's spiritual. And there are certain activities that fall under those headings, but it's not really about the activity, right? So you could have something like, you know, cooking, which is maybe sensorial, but you're coming at it from a deeper place and it actually becomes spiritual, or it's creative, or it's relational, right? So any of these could go any old place, but there's kind of traditional categories that they fall under. So if you're just to sit for a second and ask yourself, what steals my energy? Yeah, you don't have to answer, just sit with it for a second. When I'm tired, what are the main factors in my fatigue? What contributes to my exhaustion? Yeah, you can write down a few points, you can just highlight them in your head. But what makes us tired? Right, and it might immediately go to busyness or activities that we have to do or responsibilities. But if those were the things that made us tired in and of themselves, they would always make us tired. And sometimes those same activities are energizing, right? So if we're looking at these worldly happinesses, what happens is that because we forget that they're conditions and not causes, when they don't work, we hit our heads against the wall again and again trying to get them to work, because sometimes they do, right? And so say you're lost in like seeking sensorial happiness, and so you make yourself a cup of tea, and then you have a cup of tea and it's exactly the way you like your tea, and you're still discontent, but you're sure that this is the way into happiness. And so then you have a snack, right? And then the snack doesn't work, and so you think, oh, I need fresh air, I'll go for a walk. And then that walk doesn't work. And you're, you know, sort of beating your head against the wall, trying to get this condition that sometimes works to work in this moment. And because it doesn't, you get tired, right? And it's like actually naming attachment's influence on stealing our peace is the quickest way to free your energy back up. Because a cup of tea can be incredibly satisfying if you've decided that it's not about the tea, right? If you've decided that right now this tea break is in order for me to rejuvenate and refresh so I can go on to the next activity, and then when you have the cup of tea, it's oriented in a different way, right? And then it can become a condition to ripen happiness. And you might find it really satisfying and not need a snack and not need a walk and not need et cetera, to come after it. And if you've really fully enjoyed something without giving it credit for being why you enjoyed it, then you can move down into a subtler form of happiness. Right? So it's almost like these go in order of feeling satisfied, right? If you're feeling satisfied enough with your senses, then you can explore a deeper happiness of connecting to other people, right? You can have relational happiness. If you're feeling safe and secure and comfortable with enough food and whatever, then you can go into relational happiness and start building friendships and feeling connected, etc. Once you feel at one with humanity, or at least at one with your family, then you can kind of let go of focusing on that, not let go of needing it, but just kind of let go of your focus on that and move down into something subtler like work or art or something that's creative, that doesn't need an audience, right? So it's like a subtler relational happiness. Right? Because you're being expressive and you're being connective, but it's not about getting immediate feedback from something outside of yourself. It's almost connecting different parts of yourself with itself, right? And it becomes very satisfying. And then if other people like it, yay, right? So then you move, if you're feeling really comfortable with your creative happiness, then you can kind of let that go and move into spiritual happiness, right? And spiritual happiness is going to be really anything related to altruism, related to interconnection, etc. But when you're sort of fixated in one of these coarser forms, you can't touch the deeper form. And then when the deeper form isn't working, you usually revert to a coarser form to try and get some kind of relief from samsara, right? It's not working to be in my spiritual path. I'll try and do something creative. I have no muse, creative energy isn't happening, I'll talk to someone and feel connected that way and have a conversation. I don't really like people today, it's not really working today, I'll go and do something sensorial, I'll entertain myself. All right, this is kind of what we do. We're going back and forth, up and down through these without ever having necessarily labeled the fact that we are. Right? So part of us knows this is what we do, right? Like in one day, we're kind of moving up and down through these. But it's so knee-jerk and immediate for us to just be like happiness hunters without really realizing that we're using conditions instead of looking at causes. That our whole life goes by just kind of dancing between these, trying to get something to work, giving up all of our power to conditions. And then we're tired. Do you think that's true? Or would you add something to that? I mean, this is what you already know, right? But would you classify it in this way? You know, does this classification work for you?
For me, yes.
No, me? Who turned theirs off? No.
I told Neta that now I drank my Diet Coke in a spiritual way, so it's...
I'm having spiritual coffee. No. But, you know, the thing is that none of this is new information to you. It's just that we forget to be present enough to notice what on earth we're doing. Right? So it's this whole thing again of mindfulness is great, but if you don't have an agenda with your mindfulness, there's not a lot of point, right? If you don't ask yourself, why am I doing this? Noticing what you're doing is really pointless, actually, It's like, oh, I'm walking, I'm going to the toilet, I'm eating, like, who cares, right? It's good for your concentration, but raw mindfulness divorced from an agenda isn't the spiritual path, right? It's going to help you be more relaxed. It's going to help you be more focused, and that's excellent. But we want to be saying, is this activity I'm doing achieving the goal that I want? Yeah, and what is the goal that I want, right? Because one of the easiest ways to free up energy is to keep the big picture in mind. And then the very small little details of life and all the small interactions and all the little things that you do in a day have a greater context, which means when they don't turn out well, you have a greater perspective and they worry you less, right? And there's some sort of framework for everything to plug into. Yeah, so this is kind of some of the fundamental ideas of the joyous effort section, is that we need to have vision. Yeah, we need to have expansive vision about what is it we want to do with our life and what do we want to motivate our life with. And when that is clear, then everything else that happens in a life can feed into that. What normally happens is we start very narrow. Let's just get through today. Let's just get through this moment. And our vision is very insular. So then when small details don't work out, they're agitating and we're trying to manipulate and fix circumstance. And, you know, so many things are out of our control to make happen perfectly as we would plan that then we get tired, right? Trying to get things to work in this small way. So if you start big, you can do the small, but if you start small, it's hard to go big. And this is just in terms of motivation and how your mind is operating. Right? So then if you turn to the other page where it says Dharma wisdom, yeesh. All right, so this is just what we talked about last time, but I think it bears repetition. Happiness is the ripened result of previous moments of positive intention, as well as beneficial actions of body and speech. The main intentions discussed are the Eightfold Path, the 10 virtues, the 6 perfections, right? The classics, right? And they go from order of things that are common to all Buddhist practitioners to things that are specific to the Mahayana, but all of them result in happiness, right? All of them are causes for happiness when they're motivated, you know, in a clean way. So the summary here, and you know, I think that you all know this, but we have to go through it again and again so it's clear enough to argue about, because otherwise we're arguing before we know what the premise is, right? So this is the summary of how karma works. With mental intention, we create a positive action. It can be solely mental or also physical and or verbal. This leaves a seed or a potential on the mental continuum, right? Good so far. When we meet with compatible conditions, these seeds ripen or sprout as happiness, pleasure, contentment, pleasant sensations and experiences, right? So it's just a hanging out seed on the mental continuum. It gets watered, then you have experience. So the present moment experience is always a result of the past. Yeah, what you're experiencing now is not about now. How you're coping with now is creating the future, right? We know this, but it's just, we have to keep coming back to it, because if we're happy right now, we think it's about now. Yeah? And if we're unhappy now, we think it's about now. And it's always lag time, right? It's always coming from the past. All right? So depending on the potency of the seed and the time when it ripens, the effect can be a positive rebirth, fortunate circumstances, or momentary feelings of mental and physical comfort and happiness. Yeah, so, you know, they can be momentary, you know, seeds that just have enough potency to last for a few minutes or a few hours, or they can be significant enough seeds to project a whole lifetime and all the kind of coactive conditions related to it, you know, like you have the seed to live for 100 years, and then you have sort of other causes of a similar type that make you healthy during that time or unhealthy during that time, right? So the topics that can be both cause for happiness and a condition that ripens past happiness: meditative bliss, immeasurable joy, and joyous effort. So I sent you a review of immeasurable joy just in case it was vague in case you'd forgotten from when we did the 4 immeasurables. Did you want to ask anything about immeasurable joy before we go on to joyous effort? Are you refreshed? Hmm?
Yönten,
Hmm.
I don't understand something concerning this very moment, because you just explained that whatever there is in this moment is come from the past and create the future. On the other side, you often say that there is nothing but this very moment. So could you elaborate on it a little bit?
It's like if you look at the natural world, the flower that you see in this moment didn't come from this moment, right? The flower that you see in front of you is something that had a seed, that grew, that blossomed, and has a certain lifespan. Depending on how you look after it, dictates how long it's going to last. So for us, this moment is where we have experience. This is the only moment we have in terms of experience. But where we're saying it comes from is what we're discussing, right? Because if you think that this present moment experience comes from this present moment, then you give all the credit to the present moment for why you feel this way. And then you try to manufacture it again and again if it worked, or you try to avoid it again and again if it didn't work, when in fact what really is happening is seeds from the past are ripening. So if you're having this unpleasant experience, of course you can let it finish, die a natural death. You can apply something positive to it and plant a seed for the future. There's all sorts of things you can do with the present moment experience if it's suffering. But if you're thinking you're suffering because of what's happening now, that is the big mistake that steals your power, right? And even, psychologically speaking, I think there's ideas like this, right? Like someone could yell at you and be critical, and some days it bothers you and some days it doesn't. The same exact words from the same exact person. Why is it that it bothers you some days and some days it doesn't? It's because of what you came into this moment with, whatever mood or whatever, right? Or whatever conditioning. So what we're trying to do is to manipulate conditions in a way that's actually effective, and then spend more time on creating positive causes, right? And so that's why we want to develop things like joyous effort, because then you can experience happiness while creating happiness. Normally we experience happiness and then generate non-virtue, right? You have a pleasant experience, then you get attached to it, and then you plant a negative seed, which is going to ripen as suffering. So normally the way we respond to pleasantness just leads to more pain, right? Normally, right? So if you're bringing an attitude of, I'm having happiness, may everyone have happiness, excellent. If you're having I'm feeling happiness, may I continue to create the causes for that, lots of virtue, excellent. But then in joyous effort, what you're trying to do is to say, I have happiness, let's use the energy of this happiness to enrich my spiritual path. And then I can go from happiness to complete enlightenment. And that's what we want to be doing. And then I can bring all the other perfections into joyous efforts. And I can have the joyous effort of generosity and the joyous effort of ethics and the joyous effort of patience, etc., etc. And then I'm really going to have an energized and meaningful life. So when you were thinking about what steals your energy or what makes you tired, could you think of underlying thought patterns besides just the external conditions? What are the mental things you do that fatigue yourself? If anyone's comfortable sharing some of their favorites?
It always goes to narcissistic issues.
For example?
Me. Am I good enough? Am I doing it the way I want? How others sees me? All this stuff.
Yep. And why does it make you tired? Because it doesn't work?
Because why it makes me tired? It's exhausting. It's not. There is always something missing. You can't feel
Like
involved.
finished.
Anxiety, it involves needs more and more things to feel good.
Yep. If you had a patient come to you and say, I'm so exhausted and I don't know why, I don't have that much to do in my life and I enjoy the conditions of my life, generally speaking, but for some reason I'm always tired and there's nothing physically wrong with me, what would you say to a patient like that? Or what would you explore with them? Or say in your head about why you think they're tired?
Excluding Corona, right?
Yeah, yeah. They don't have the coronavirus. They don't have anything wrong with them physically. They don't have anything wrong necessarily in the context of their life, but why are they tired? What would you say in your head? What would you explore with them?
You explore, like you kind of ask what is meaningful for them.
Yeah. Yeah. And are you able to engage with it as freely as you want or with the support that you want, right? What is meaningful for you? What robs us of meaning when we're doing something that at one point we thought was meaningful? Because there's, even our work, right? Or our study, it's something that we know is meaningful, we find meaningful, but then we can become tired because of it. What makes us tired when we are doing what we've branded as meaningful?
This goes back to what Netta said.
Yeah.
Okay. If you ask, it is tiring if you ask, did I succeed or not? But if you ask about the thing by itself, it's the thing by itself. It's not tiring. It is there anyway.
Yeah. And it's, there's this whole thing of doing something that you find as meaningful, but then what was your expectation of outcome, right?
Yeah.
What was your expectation of how quick it was going to happen or what it was going to lead to immediately, what people were going to think of you when you did it, all that kind of classic stuff that you already know. And yet, when we are feeling tired doing something that we love, do we know why? Yeah. If it's something that, we've decided this is absolutely worth my time, this is something I value, but there's this heaviness, or this burnout, right? What makes you burn out doing something that you like? It's obvious what makes you burn out when you're doing something you don't like, when you're doing something you think is meaningless or you think people don't support you, all that kind of stuff is quite obvious why that would wear you out. But when you're doing what you love, and you're still burning out, what mental factors are you bringing to it that are robbing it of its joy or robbing it of its energy?
For me, I think it's doubt. When I have doubts about the goal or disappointments, something along the way.
Yeah,
So
doubt.
I lose my sharp focus that it's the right thing that I should be putting all my energy into. Suddenly it gets blurry.
Yeah. And doubt does that second guessing and, planning, should I or shouldn't I, going back and forth. One of the big reasons why people take ordination, why they become monks or nuns, is that it takes some of that should I or shouldn't I back and forth mental exhaustion out because you've made a lot of decisions already. You know, however many vows you made, those are decisions you've already made, then you don't need to second guess it. You know, it's like you've decided this is a healthy structure to grow within, and so come what may, I'm going to do it. And then you don't wear yourself out as much with should I or shouldn't I, or can I get away with it, or whatever. Not to say that it's always perfect or works, but there is power in promises, right? There's power in promises and there's power in commitment. And some of that relies on knowing how you are when you're your most sane, your most wise, your most settled, being able to kind of clarify in your mind what is as good as it gets for you so far. You know, it's going to keep getting better and better as you progress along your path. But for you, you know, what is your most sane, rational self? Decisions born from that place are trustworthy. And to, you know, come back to that self-knowledge again and again and say, I made that decision from that place. Stop overthinking it. Yeah, don't wear yourself out. That was coming from the good place. You know, other decisions that were made out of attachment, you know, like different, I don't know, purchases that you might make spontaneously. And you're like, oh, should I have bought those? Should I not have bought those? You know, those were not born from your most rational place. Second guess them. But I think that part of what can give energy is being more cautious with decisions. And then when you make decisions, checking, is it coming from that kind of best version of yourself? Because I think it can really help with that doubt aspect, because it certainly does take a lot of mental energy. Was that the right thing to do or not? And you just say, no, it was the right thing to do, given what I know so far. If I come to know more about life and reality, I can revisit it. But right now, stop agonizing, stop obsessing, right? So it's interesting. So what else, you know, when you're doing meaningful things and yet it's still wearing?
For me, it's the expectations from some kind of expectation that the patients will feel good, that I will help them. So when it is, it becomes from something that is more ideal to something that is more narcissistic in the grandiose. And then it's tiring and.
Yeah. And then what makes it most likely for you to slide into that kind of expectation? Because of course there's a lot of times when you're not in that and you can just go with the flow and whatever's happening, you're embracing and accepting, yada, yada. But when you slide into that kind of more grandiose expectation place, what came before it? Or what allowed it? Because these are the questions we need to ask ourselves is, you know, sometimes we have no idea what came before it. You know, maybe you were just hungry, right? Or maybe, you know, maybe you just hadn't gotten enough sleep that night. And then, you know, when you're a bit vulnerable, negative states of mind come up easier, you know, it's natural, right? But to sit with the last time I went from my rational self to my irrational self, what came in between? Yeah, was it just raw distraction? And distraction kind of leaves the door open to any number of negative states of mind to jump in and fill the space. Was it, you know, hope and fear, 8 worldly concerns, all of that, et cetera, et cetera. But that's what we have to sit with, right? Is to, rather than beating ourselves up for feeling tired, say, I am tired, I must need to rest, but what happened before this tired? Yeah. Because our choices were good, you know? I'm guessing for the most part, our big life decisions are working out okay. And if not, you'll figure it out, right? But, you know, what is it that makes you slip? Yeah. And you can just do a bit of a reflection with yourself in a quiet moment, you know, in a 10-minute way, and just say, the days I've been on track, really, you know, a powerful day where I was the way I know I can be at my best, what surrounding conditions were there? And when I slipped off and I was that irrational self and I let negative states of mind take hold, what preceded that? So, you know, what preceded it was conditions, which brought up negative seeds, which ripened as unhappiness. And then when you're unhappy, you're more likely to be afflicted and ripen more negative seeds, right? And then it becomes this vicious circle, and then you wind up having a whole day where you're in a mood, yeah? So anyway, when we're looking at joyous effort, it should be something that like frees ourselves up. Yeah, joyous effort is a way to prevent burnout and a way to recover from burnout, not to feel bad for having burnt out, right? Not to punish yourself or feel bad about it. Our society does not train us to pace ourselves correctly, right? Our society does not train ourselves to think of the big picture first and then bring it in to what's immediately in front of you. Right? So it's only natural that we would get worn out. And especially if we want to help the world, and helping the world is kind of an endless project, it's hard to give yourself permission to slow down, right? So if you want to turn to your main text, so after the Hebrew, then there's the textual outline of the 37 practices. And then there's a summary of the joyous effort section. So these are the main sections that we'll cover when we do joyous effort, and we'll just kind of skim a little bit today and then drill down deeper into each one of them. So is everybody there where at the top of the page it says developing momentum, what to adopt, the 3 types of joyous effort?
It's page 18.
Yep. Okay, so basically the sections are what to adopt, what to abandon, and what supports, right? So there are 3 like main sections in the joyous effort section of the Lamrim Chenmo by Lama Tsongkhapa, and that's directly where this was taken from. So basically when you talk about what to adopt, this doesn't mean that you have it yet. It means that you're trying to identify what it would be like, or what it's like in its small form, kind of get a sense of it, and then consciously expand and deepen it. So they're quite relatable, like they're not intellectually difficult points at all. It's just in terms of trying to really touch it experientially as yourself as an individual. So it starts with armor-like joyous effort. And armor-like joyous effort is as it sounds, where you're armoring yourself against all the difficulties of life. But the imagery of armor can be quite off-putting, right? Because you don't want to think of yourself as like, I don't know, separate from others or blocking them or being militant in some way. Like it can bring up all these kind of connotations that you don't like. But what you're really saying is that if your resolve is very strong, nothing can hurt you, right? And so this is what happens when you've set a motivation that's really clear and finite usually, but we want to expand it so it's infinite. But so take, for example, I don't know, you're going to go to a friend's funeral, okay? And it's a friend that you care about very much, and you know that you're going to be a little bit emotional. But you also know that there's going to be a lot of people from your past there that are very confronting and triggering, and all sorts of family dynamics that are going to be complicated, and the parking is going to be a mess, and it's going to be a big balagan, right? So you know this about this funeral before you even go, yeah? And so what you do is you sit with yourself and you say, what is my purpose in going to this funeral? And you think, okay, my purpose is to, I don't know, celebrate the life of my friend and to connect with other people who loved her, and to find a way to make this an enriching, meaningful experience. All right, something like that, right? But you sit with it, you know, in the car, before you leave the house, you know, wherever, but you armor yourself with the reason I'm going is, yeah? And then you go, and it is difficult, and there are all sorts of dynamics, and there's all sorts of hardships involved, but you're prepared, you're armored by the point of us all being here together is to celebrate this life. So when I'm triggered by so-and-so, I'm actually not giving that permission to get in. Yeah, it doesn't have permission to get in and steal my peace, because I've already planned what this is about this moment. So I'm sure in our lives, there's been times when we've done this, right? You've made a plan of, I need to stay beneficial, or I need to stay open, or I need to stay supportive because what's happening is important. And because it's important, I'm going to hold steady throughout the whole thing, despite what triggers me. Not that nothing will trigger you, it's that it can't get in. You know, so it's like people are throwing little pebbles at you and they just ping off the surface of your armor, right? Rather than if you were just wearing your soft clothes and they would hit you and eventually get to you and you'd eventually crumple and need to leave. So do you know the state of mind that I'm talking about? It's not like gritting your teeth, like, I just have to get through this. It's not that. It's that you've really softened your mind to really hold compassion and love as the main point of all this. And you're so permeated with compassion and love that things that are counter to that can't rob you of your peace. Yeah. And so if you've done this for an amount of time that you're able to so far at your level, this is like Armor Like Joyous effort. Right? So it might be that, you know, you say, all right, I'm going to be able to stay until the end of the funeral, but I can't stay for the reception when everyone starts eating and starts being all crazy. I can't cope with that. I don't have enough mental strength yet to stay the way I need to stay for that long. So I'm going to leave at this point.
What happens this way here?
Huh?
We don't have a celebration with food, etc. usually.
You don't?
Mm-hmm.
But you eat all the time. Except funerals. But do you know what I mean? Like, don't get lost in the example. Think of some situation, right? Where because of how important it is, you've not let yourself become afflicted. Is it possible, right? Like, haven't you done this at some point in your life? It was something that you thought you would get afflicted. It was a classic time when you would, but you got yourself prepared and somehow permeated with enough compassion for yourself and the situation that you held it together. Can you relate to this? Have I lost anyone? Right? Do you know what I mean? So it's not trying to just get through it because you have to, right? It's not that mind. It's the mind that's just kind of gotten over yourself, right? It's like, I have to be bigger than this, right? I have to be bigger than all these petty dramas. Or I have to be bigger than all my personal wants. This is too important, right? So this is Armor Like Joyous perseverance before it's the perfection, right? When it's the perfection of Armor Like Joyous effort, then your big point that you're armoring yourself with is, because I need to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings, blah, 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 blah. This isn't gonna get to me. I have to be bigger than this because bodhicitta is bigger than this. But you also realize that your ability to stay in that space is not an indefinite time span, right? Because we can't stay focused that long because we're not that used to it. And so you're, you know, giving yourself a bit of a break and pacing it as well. So it's said that one of the ways to develop Armor Like Joyous effort is to look at the examples of others that you respect, right? So you look at, I don't know, someone like Gandhi or someone like Nelson Mandela, who had really a lot of hardship and maintained their kindness, right? And we take them as an example of that is possible for a human being. Therefore, it's possible for me, right? And we just kind of let ourselves get inspired in a way that still identifies with the person we're being inspired by, rather than holding them up on a pedestal as some different species of being. Do you know what I mean? So you can think, okay, so Nelson Mandela was really amazing that he was in prison all those years and blah, blah, blah. He was still friendly at the end. If I was thrown in prison, how long would it take me to get to that space? Or how quickly would I lose my compassion? You know, it's hard to say. But you just kind of like think, how can I relate to this person that inspires me? How am I already like that, but I just need to grow up a bit more? Yeah? Do you know what I mean? And so you can think of, okay, so here's them doing this amazing thing. Then how was I that one time when things were really hard and I didn't lose it, right? And you go, okay, so I could meet them in that space. It's an achievable thing. So it's interesting, but it said that one of the strongest ways to develop this is to be inspired by other people. What do you think? Does it work? Is it enough to think this other person can do it, therefore it's possible? Oh, yeah, Sigalit?
Yeah, something about the armor-like Joyous efforts. Before thinking about the spiritual mentors, something it's connected to what we practice in meditation, the attention on the object. Keep the attention and not let the other disturbance or others noises take our awareness. Sorry about my English, but
no, I know what you mean. Yeah, you're right. It's exactly like that. Like at the beginning of the meditation, you connect, and then, yeah, come what may, you keep coming back to your focal object.
all the time keep to the focal object, and it can be the wisdom or and not letting the noises or the other
distractions.
Yes. So when practice meditation, you can practice the armor-like Joyous effort.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Easier,
yeah. Exactly. And when you're having a good session, it's usually because you have a type of this armor-like Joyous effort. You just haven't known the name for it, or that's what it was. You know, it's that you set your motivation in this like really heartfelt way, not just the words, but you've really like, yeah, no, actually, for 25 minutes, for 30 minutes, I'm just going to sincerely try. I'm really going to try, even though I'm worried about this thing at home, even though I'm excited about this thing next. Okay, I'm going to do this. And you've really, you know, prepared yourself. Then of course you get distracted like always, but it doesn't have the same duration. And you come back quicker and you're like, nope, 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 not today, not today, right? And you just keep coming back and keep coming back. So yeah, it's exactly like that. And we already do it some days. It's just about making it more of a plan to do it. Yeah. Yeah, Smada, did you have something? No, yes.
I wanted to say that for me, it helps me to think about quotes talking about the idealization. If we think about the funeral, it's not about me. It's about someone that I'm going to respect his funeral and his family, and also the inspiration, the people that you mentioned, they are on the idyllic idealization, and everything we can do from a narcissistic, grandiose position, and we can do from idealization, even if it's very samsaric, also to eat and to drink and to sleep. So
exactly. It's just like looking at the worldly wisdom that the activities themselves aren't necessarily what makes them fall under their respective heading. It's the motivation you bring to it. So yeah, the most like quote samsaric of things could actually be the most spiritual, and the most spiritual looking thing could actually be the most samsaric. But you'll notice at the end of the day where it's not been about you, you sleep well. You sleep well. And, you know, if you can sleep well, you know, if your body is cooperating and et cetera, et cetera. But, you know, on days when you've been doing like good things, but for the wrong reason, it's like part of us knows and does some sort of dance of justification and trying to resolve it and find some place to put it in our mind where it kind of feels settled, but we're kind of spinning and buzzing a little bit and it's hard to settle and we sleep unsettled and like this. So it's like, we know that the nature of an affliction is that which makes the mind unpeaceful, right? When there is an affliction present, the mind is agitated. When joyous effort is present, there is no room for afflictions. And so the mind stays very peaceful, but can still have a lot of energy and movement. And then when it's time to rest, you can just let go and rest. It's not such a mission to wind down in order to rest, right? So that's one way to kind of figure out, you know, has the motivation been steady and clear? Because sometimes we have a half steady and clear bodhicitta-ish motivation, and then all sorts of, you know, sort of vulnerabilities and worries and existential crises and identity issues and 8 worldly concerns also, and it's all mixed up together. Yeah. And then we're trying to achieve the higher goal, but actually trying to achieve the lower goal. And this back and forth means that it's kind of ineffective and also exhausting, right? So it's just kind of coming back to, right, why am I doing this? It can change the reason why, but let's be clear about it. Yeah, and what's the highest and the deepest and the vastest, you know, that we can manage today in this moment. Yeah, because when you're motivated in that way, also there's less mental activity that involves self-obsession or self-consciousness, right? So self-obsession, self-consciousness, you know, these symptoms of self-cherishing, it's like while you're doing what you're doing, you're watching yourself, but not with mindfulness. You're watching yourself, how will people see me as I do this? Or what does this say about me that I'm the sort of person that does this? And then it interrupts the flow of the good activity. Yeah, so there's the good activity and you're doing it for good reasons, but then when this self-cherishing kind of co-ops it, then you're kind of adding a narrative or like a commentary over the top of the good work. Yeah, and then it's double mental activity, agitated mental activity, more tired afterwards. Do you think? So it's just something to explore, this one. It's an interesting one to explore. And Armor Light Joyous effort then leads on to the joyous effort of acting constructively or cultivating necessities. So this is basically plugging joyous effort into the other perfections, right? And so all the other perfections flow when you have joyous effort with them. And so how do you have joyous effort with generosity, for example? Right? What's the joyous effort of generosity? Just guessing. Yeah.
Give
So
from,
yeah, go.
from, you give from a place, not a narcissistic place, but a place of wanting to give to others. And no matter what the reaction will be, you'll be in a quiet position. It's the motivation to give. And I think it will help decrease tiredness or...
Yeah. And, you know, and it's remembering that like something like the practice of generosity is good whether or not it's received well. If you have a bodhicitta motivation and you want to offer, you know, I don't know, Dharma, freedom from fear, loving kindness, material offerings, sometimes it like works, sometimes it lands, sometimes it doesn't. But it does habituate your mind to the intention to give. And anything that habituates your mind to the intention to give helps free you of attachment. And attachment makes you miserable, right? So you can be, first of all, happy for your own sake. How wonderful I could be generous in this moment because I'm getting over myself and that's going to end well, right? And then on the top, you're creating the cause for resources in the future. That's going to work out well for you. But then even more expansive than that, this habit of generosity is going to at some point land in such a way that it is significant for the other. And you're not going to miss the opportunity because you're getting such a good habit of it. So it's like delighting in the fact that you're practicing, right? It's loving practice, basically. Joyous effort with each of these is loving doing them for their own sake, right? For what they do to your mind in this moment, for what they do to your mind in the future, for what they create for you in the future, but you're loving what this does to your mind, right? And so the joyous effort of generosity is loving to give, right? The joyous effort of ethics is loving non-harmfulness, right? Enjoying having a mind that is settled and disciplined and doesn't want to harm others. You know, it's a clean, clear, virtuous mind ethics. And it's a joy, right, to be in that space, as opposed to when you're being a little bit unethical and you're feeling guilt and shame and all sorts of different thoughts are spiraling around. A day that's lived ethically, you're just really content when it's genuine, right? Etc. So, you know, the joyous effort of patience, this can be like a celebration every time you don't get angry. You know, it's like every time someone is horrible to you or you're having physical and mental suffering and you don't let it turn you into anger or turn you into depression, right? Every time you don't let the same old thing happen, you can have like this delighted feeling like this is practice, more of this. Yeah, so it's healthy satisfaction that creates this confidence in your own ability to create new pathways in your mind. Does it make sense? I don't know. Yes? It depends a little bit on thinking about the benefits of what you're doing without it becoming a narcissistic trap, right? Thinking of the benefits from a spiritual perspective rather than an immediate gratification perspective. You know, it's like today I was cleaning my house and I was trying to save some ants, and the ants may or may not be grateful, right? Like they might not even notice that they were suddenly transported outside, right? I don't need them to say, oh, thank you, you know, and like prostrate with their little ant hands, right? I don't need them to do that, but I was feeling really happy that I had an excuse to remember life-saving, right? It was an excuse to remember reverence for life. Yeah, it was like how kind these ants are for coming into my house so I can put them back out so I don't hurt them, right? How kind, even though they're not meaning to be kind, they have no intention of trying to help my practice, but they're helping my practice, right? And it sounds kind of like a silly dance in your mind, and yet a habit of non-harmfulness is going to mean less sickness in this and future lives. That if I'm not as sick, I might be in a better position to benefit others. So it might be too late for us with the coronavirus. We might all get it, but the next one we might prevent, etc. Right? I don't know. Do you have qualms? Do you have resistance to this one? It can sound a little bit too sweet. Yeah. Sigalik?
Resistant. Just to say that this morning when I was driving, there was a bus in front of me, and the driver was horrible. He's all the time changed the direction, netivim, no?
The lanes.
Okay, and then I started to get angry. It was לעכב אותי, no? לא חשוב. And then I remembered that the driver was driving today for all the public and endangering himself because of and I was so grateful for him that he's driving. And then I was pleased that I can be patient and give him the way.
Yeah.
It's happened all the time, but this day it was. I felt it in a more. Never mind. Because I remember the corona that he's driving now and he's driving people and endangering himself. So I was really grateful for him.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's exactly that. And then you're like pleased with yourself, but not in a narcissistic way, right? It's more like a celebration of your own potential coming closer and closer to fruition. You know, it's like, wow, practice is working. How wonderful, you know? 10 years ago, I would have just flipped him off and swore. Today, I was actually even happy. I transformed it, you know, all the way into some happiness. Like, how amazing, you know? And then, so you're sort of like pleased with yourself, but not in a creepy way, you know?
Yes.
Virtuously pleased with yourself. Yeah. And, you know, it's a bit like this one of the joyous effort of working for the welfare of sentient beings. So if you're thinking that all of your activities, small, medium, large, etc., are all motivated by bodhicitta, then you have this kind of flow of this is all feeding back into the main purpose of my life. Like traffic can do it, you know, like cooking can do it, all the mundane things can do it, and working for the welfare of sentient beings, whatever that looks like, whatever the ultimate thing that's going to happen with it, that is what I want to be about, you know. And whenever you're remembering what it is you want to be about, I think you kind of lift into that space and out of your own afflictions. So anyway, we'll leave it there for today, and your Wednesday meditation will be on these 3 types of joyous efforts, so we'll have some more time to sit with them and flesh them out. But for your homework, could you just read the Heart of Compassion, the 37 verses of the Practice of a Bodhisattva, just that section by Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche. It's just on the next page. Yeah. So it's 3 pages long. Yeah, start it and hopefully finish by next Monday. So we'll just take a minute to digest and reconnect. Thanks, guys. Try and do the meditations today if you can, and I'll see you Wednesday.